Welcome to Cinematalkraphy. We watch movies with you so you don't have to.
Do you have an OS you love?
Oh, I mean, not intimately.
Okay, I want to say this right now about this film. By the way, hi everybody. This is Rudy Vegas and I was about to say Bryce Castillo.
Hi, my name is Bryce Castillo, and I am a horrible racist.
It's Brand Hughes.
I hate people of all colors.
And welcome to Cinematography. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. Normally we would talk during a movie, during commentary. You'd all watch it together with us. But today we're actually going to talk about a film we saw in person there at the Alamo Drafthouse.
Because we never see any films in person.
No, we're virtual each time.
Yeah. We just imagine the film.
Exactly. That film is Hers, directed by Spike Jonze, right?
Yeah. And
I'm going to say this right now before we even get this review proper or this discussion proper. That is a dystopian hipster. The way I view the world's future is that what if the world was created by hipsters and that's the future they imagined? Because holy shit, that was like hipster as all hell.
I mean, all right.
I mean, like, did you notice like everybody had like pants up to here and
yeah, it was great. I loved it.
It felt like, I mean, it's okay. It's just, it's funny because I noticed that I'm like thinking in my head of like, okay, yes, the tech's futuristic, everything else. I wasn't bad with that. This is not even me critiquing the film. This is more the whole atmosphere of the film. Because actually, I'll flat out say I love the film. I thought it was a great movie. But I mean, it felt so hipster for a bit, which is not a bad thing. It's just like, man, it made me realize like the kind of future I imagine in my head, the kind of thing that, like, I think if a bunch of geeks made, you know, a fully AI female OS, like, I think that's like best described in like movies like Weird Science, whereas this is sort of the, I guess, modern version. But let's explain exactly what Her is. Give a rundown, Mr. Hughes.
I think if you need a synopsis, then stop listening and go watch it. I don't think you should need that. Just take our word. Go watch it.
Yeah. So let's see. What did you like about the film?
Everything. I loved it so much. I'm still reeling from it. Like, we saw it, what, 40 minutes ago?
40 minutes ago, yeah.
It ended 40 minutes ago. And I'm still just like, man, I don't know.
The one thing I'll say about the film that I really dug, first off, the cinematography was gorgeous.
Oh my God, it was such a beautiful movie.
That was beautiful. Like, every shot was pretty much beautiful as all hell.
It was insane how pretty everything looked.
Like the opening shot of the film is, God, what's the main actor's name?
You're thinking of Joaquin Phoenix.
Joaquin Phoenix, that's right, because it stars Joaquin Phoenix and what's that? Scarlett Johansson, the voice, but we'll get into that later. It opens up with Joaquin Phoenix,
just face,
but not even like I think Joaquin Phoenix, like I think of a pretty boy, whatever, and this is like an older guy, like in terms of I have a certain image in my head of Joaquin Phoenix, and maybe that's just tells you how many Joaquin Phoenix movies I've seen, but
probably.
But regardless of that, it opens up with this sort of thing, and Joaquin Phoenix's character, his name's Theodore Twelvo or something, like two something or another. I can't pronounce it right now because I know I'm screwed up. But it opens up in him saying this like most beautiful thing, and you're thinking, okay, we're getting a character talking about his life, talking about his love life, whatever. That's what we're going to get into. And no, it turns out he works for this like a handwritten letter service. This is the most like impersonal thing I've ever thought would ever exist in any future. The idea like, oh man, I want to write a letter to my mother, but I am too lazy not only A, to handwrite it, or B, to type it. I am too lazy to even think about it. I'm going to get this guy to write it for me and to express what I'm feeling.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's a market in that. I think we should start this company.
Maybe you're right. But it opens up with this gorgeous shot of just his face, which I think I think the two favorite shots in my film, there are two that I adored the most thinking in my head. One is the opening shot. I thought that was a very excellent way to kind of set the tone, especially when they pull away and they realize, oh, he's been dictating this letter. Oh, it's not even about him. And then you hear him start dictating another letter, and then other people dictating their same letters, and then you hear someone say, handwrittenletters.com, like I answered the phone or something like that.
Yeah.
And then the other shot I really loved, because I know we're talking about cinematography otherwise, it's a shot where you just hear essentially Scarlett Johansson sort of talking about it, the relationship. We'll go into more of the actual meat of the movie soon. And it's a shot overhead of the city. And I think it's during the day of the city. And maybe actually during the night. Like, I'm a huge fan of always like nighttime kind of shots.
Yeah, there was one specific shot of the city at night that I
where it does like an
loved.
overhead shot of the entire city. And you can see, reflections, everything else. It is fucking gorgeous.
Yeah, all of the city shots were super nice.
Yeah, no, everything was pretty nice. But let's actually go into the movie proper. So essentially, we have this character of Theodore. Theodore recently is in a divorce. He's kind of dealing with all these kind of emotional things, kind of getting through it. And somehow along the way, he sees an advertisement for this operating system, this fully AI OS called OS 1, which, by the way, would be a real name for an OS.
Sure.
And, he goes, okay, I'll buy it. He installs it and starts asking these like really off the wall kind of questions. How he is with his mother, how his relationships are, like all these sort of weird things that you wouldn't expect an install to ask you. I would think like an install would be like, what's your name? What's your age? Blah, all these kind of personal things. And then they go, well, do you want a male or female voice? And he goes, well, I guess female. And then we start hearing the voice of Samantha, the AI. And I gotta say, I kind of want an AI like that, like just one that's like that personal.
Yeah.
Like how did that rub you? How did that like react? How did you react to that? I mean, especially in a world where we have things like Siri that's not quite there yet.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like a very plausible, realistic way in which things could very well evolve.
I mean, it's different. It's definitely weird. Not weird, but anyway. So the actual meat of the story really is the fact that our character Theodore starts falling in love with his operating system. And I know normally that would sound weird and strange and bizarre, especially now. But that's felt so natural in that film.
I don't even think it seems too weird.
Well, I'm saying it's the interesting part about this movie that I think I like about it a lot. And this is something that has been always bugging me. Whenever we talk about artificial intelligence science fiction, it's always with a negative tone. We always usually have something negative. Like there's very few positive AI films. Or even positive artificial intelligence characters, for that matter. Usually, they always turn evil. They always do this sort of bad thing. They always are the menacing thing, the idea like Skynet and all that stuff. And what I dug about this movie the most is that this was the first time I'd seen in a science fiction film. Because don't get me wrong, as much of a romance this is, it is very much science fiction. There's a lot of those reminders in there. What I dug about it was that it didn't put a negative light on this. Like there were points where only certain characters were like weirded out, but everyone was okay with it. Everyone's like, "Oh, okay, so you're dating your OS, whatever." So yeah, we'll bring it along. And the idea that this technology was so pervasive that it never seemed out of place when people were talking to their computers or talking to their AI units or whatever. You just put on your headset, your little earbud sort of thing, which I thought was really fucking cool, by the way. And you would just talk, and there'd be nothing weird about it. And it was just sort of natural way of existing. And that's rare in science fiction. I mean, there's always AI things like that in sci-fi and stuff like that, but usually the AI is the enemy. Where in terms of her, it was sort of just an extension of things, and I really dug that part of the story. I mean, what was your thoughts on the whole on that part? Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, all right, I'm trying to figure this out in my head. I feel like a lot of science fiction films, especially, this is a bit different in that it's kind of a romantic movie,
right,
in a way, and so a lot of science fiction films that are, thriller or action or suspense or whatever, they need an element of danger and they need a primary conflict and stuff like that. And so technology is a really easy thing to put in that role because so many things could go wrong with it.
Right. People fear it. People are scared
sure.
by the idea.
And this didn't need that because it was kind of a character piece, and it was about people and emotions and all of that great stuff, and really complex thoughts and ideas, and it worked so well, and it felt like in hindsight, such an obvious extension of today's culture.
Yeah, no, that was what was interesting about it, was that, as the movie went on, as you could see the relationship forming between Samantha and Theo, it just felt like, oh yeah, this is what totally would happen. Like I would totally fall for this girl. And I stopped, and that was what the interesting part is. After a while, I stopped thinking about her as an OS. You as a moviegoer don't really think about her as an OS. You think about her as another character, another person. And yeah, she'll question things like that, talk about things in sometimes an interesting way, and say, "Hey, you got an email for this? Hey, you got that." But after a while, you don't even really think of her as anything different in life. You just think, "Oh, she's another person." Just happens to have no body. What I really liked about it was that this might be one of the few romantic movies I've seen that is intimate without being sexual, without being really heavily sexually intimate. There is the weird, like, Weibo moment, for lack of better words.
Sure.
But even then, it was like you actually got a lot of real emotion. I think the last time I kind of saw that kind of real emotion might have actually been when we saw Upstream Color way back when. Just because it was so much dialogue and so much talking and so much sort of conveyance between two characters, between Theo and Samantha, that I never at any point in the entire film even remembered she was an OS. Like, right. I didn't remember she was I knew she was an AI in the back of my mind, but it never felt like, oh, whatever, who cares? It was literally just two people falling in love.
Yeah, I remember early on in the film, I kind of went into it knowing that it tried to reach the emotional depths that I felt by the end of it, and I was really curious as to how they would convey that with effectively a character that you never see.
Right. And
I was like, I'm sure this is possible, but I don't know how effective it's going to be. And then, you just get 15, 20 minutes into the movie and you totally lose yourself in it. And then it does really terrific things that you weren't aware of was on the docket going into it.
Well, I think that was because, like, both, the two characters and even the two actors and actresses, they just knew exactly how to. I want to know if actually Scarlett Johansson was on set.
I believe I remember hearing that she was not.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Because, like, there were, like, because that means, and this was what's, think about it in other things, that means somebody was acting to nothing.
Yeah, Joaquin Phoenix, especially,
and
with his face in, like, 95% of the movie, of, like, every shot. Of
which I thought was a very interesting way to do this kind of romance sort of thing, because you never would think that, when it comes to usual romance movies, like the rom-coms or romance dramas or anything like that, there's always a second person physically there that they can bounce off, they can focus the camera on, they can do whatever. But because our secondary character, our love interest for Theo is sort of
in his ear,
you're getting the full range of emotion on Joaquin, where normally they would cut to the other face. You're seeing, like, the distraughtness, the happiness, the sadness. You're seeing this whole range of emotion with this character as we're focusing on him and his life and everything else he goes through. And it adds to it. But even on that same regard, with Scarlett Johansson's character, with Samantha, no matter what, even though we're just hearing her voice, not seeing a face, you can still hear, this distraughtness, this anger, this sadness, this sort of all melancholy, this whatever emotion that she needs you to hear, she conveys in her voice so solidly that there's no question that, yeah, she's there. But knowing the fact that she wasn't there, that even more impresses me, because that means somebody, did their job as an actor or actress, maybe both in the end of it all, who knows. But like I was blown away by that.
Yeah, it was super impressive how clearly and effectively both primary characters conveyed how they felt with like so much nuance.
Oh God, yeah.
It was so easy to feel everything that you felt throughout the movie without anything being overstated or trite or anything like that.
Well, no, yeah. I mean, because there are points in the film where you could tell where it was going to go. Like I could tell when they were about to, break up in the film. And yes, I realize it's spoilers for you people who haven't watched the film, but we told you at the beginning, just go watch the damn film before listening to this.
I just assume people have seen anything that we talk about whenever we talk about
it doesn't fucking matter.
If not, then they're dumb.
Yeah, they're dumb.
And they should stop listening to us forever.
I agree.
Unsubscribe. No thanks. Dislike. Thumbs down.
It's 1-star rating. But, I could see that happening when it's happened. But what I liked about the movie in general was that, yes, there's a science fiction backdrop. Yes, it's in a sci-fi world. Yes, we have an AI that's feeling emotion and all that kind of stuff. But it never went into the typical things a science fiction film does when it comes to that. And there are usually certain telltale things they'll do. Like the only movies I've seen that have done it like AI and emotion right have been like Blade Runner and this so far. And there have been other films that have done AI, but they've never felt like there's this thing. So what I enjoyed about this movie is that Samantha as a character, as she's gaining these emotions, is going, hey, wait a minute, is this me? Is this an OS? Is this program? Questioning herself, much like anyone else would if they're just, new to this world and new to this kind of thing. I think that's what I enjoyed the most about this movie is it was a first time that I had watched a science fiction romance kind of film, a different way of doing a science fiction film. Because you're right, traditionally it's always actiony, it's always this. I mean, if I think of thought-provoking science fiction films, they're like 2000. I can name a handful, really. If I think of action ones, I can name as many as I'd like. And I think that's what I dug about this movie the most was that it had that world as a backdrop, but it wasn't so much about the world. And even with that, I still dug everything I could see. I still dug this sort of, almost kind of Neo-Japan kind of thing going on with it.
I was really interested to think about like what they were basing this city off of because this city is gorgeous.
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, there's bullet trains and then there's cityscapes and sort of beaches around there. There's like a whole slew of stuff in this world, and it never really quite tells you where they are.
Right.
And I think that's to its benefit. Because if they had said "Welcome to New York," they would I think that's why I liked the most about it too was that it never felt like we're in Chicago, we're in Dallas, we're in New York, we're in wherever. We're just in a town, an urban setting. You know,
I think specifying definitely would have just got in the way of something.
I agree. I agree. I think by having that sort of amorphous kind of thing of it just being the cityscape. Really lent itself to do a lot of interesting things, to go to the carnival, to go to the beach, to go where it needed to go without having to muck around with establishing all these sort of characteristics of a town. Because that's not what the story's about. The story's not about the town. The town is just merely a backdrop. It's not even about the future, really. The future is just merely a backdrop for this sort of different kind of relationship that... you could only do in the future because there's, that kind of AI, but more importantly, that's not really the point of the story. The point of the story is here are two characters kind of stumbling through life. You have Theo, who is kind of coming out of an emotional coma, for lack of better words. And then you have Samantha, who's coming into her own as a person, and they both kind of meet each other at that apex of their lives. and that's how they hook up. And I think that's what I find the most fascinating about this whole thing is that it never, I never for a moment would have thought that was going to be this kind of movie. Like, I had a feeling, going in this film that I may have gotten upset at it for some reason. Like, I'm not even going to lie. I had a feeling going in this movie that it was going to be this sort of, for lack of better words, a bad science fiction film. I didn't really know. I heard like the reviews, whatever, blah, 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 blah. But I always had the back of my mind, like, I'm not going to like this film. There's going to be something they're going to do that's going to bug me, that's going to rub me the wrong way. Then I'm going to say, not even like tech wise.
The teardrops didn't stay attached to her face.
Yes.
I'm so upset.
But there's going to be something that's going to bug me and something that I'm not going to like. Either it's because of an acting thing or a visual style. Because again, I jokingly said, yeah, it's the hipster future. And it is, but that's not, and I thought that would get to me enough where I'd say, forget this film. But as the movie kept going along, and yeah, I noticed at the corner of my eye, just because I have to, I never thought that it felt out of place. I never felt anything that was there felt out of place. And I started to realize, okay, we're in the future because we have to be. But if this had been a traditional movie, Samantha would have been a human. But I wonder something, and this is I'm going to ask you as a question. Do you feel that if it had been set in now and Samantha was a human, do you feel that would have taken away from the movie?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I do too, because I think by it being an AI and by it being this sort of voice as opposed to a body and whatnot, I would even felt weird had it been a robot, for example, or something like that, or some cyborg. Like, I feel by it not for being this sort of bodiless entity, an avatar voice in the machine, so to speak, I felt that's what really lent this movie its strength, because had it been set in now, we had Scarlett Johansson and that, like, no, it wouldn't have been as good. It would have been just a independent kind of love story. But by it being a voice, by it being this hyper-intelligent AI that kind of comes into its own, you get the advantage of doing interesting things. You get the advantage of introducing her at first of like, as just a program, like, hey, how's it going? Yeah, I'll check your email. I think these ones are good. Oh, rock and roll, thank you. Being that sort of voice. But as it goes on and she starts saying, hey, I have this song I'm working on. Do you want to hear it? You're like, you're working on a song? You can play piano? And it gets weird, it gets interesting and stuff, and you can tell again as she's changing and she starts talking with other operating systems about, life, the universe, and everything. That it goes in this interesting place that I don't think could have happened had it just been a regular, set in the 2000s kind of thing.
Yeah, and I've been trying to distill what makes this movie so special and resonant for me. And I think because one of the main characters is an artificial intelligence, I think as these characters are going through their journey and their process of discovery and everything, there's a lot of philosophical problems that they're trying to solve within each other. Since, Samantha is more or less just a consciousness, an idea, and not an actual physical thing. They're really trying to solve and understand what is between them and what they each are, and there's so many questions that I think most people ask of themselves at some point in their life, and nobody really knows the answer to. The fact that these characters go through it, and they go through it in such a it's such a relatable thing.
Yeah.
But it's something that's put in a more tangible way than we deal with it in our daily lives. And I think because it's a well-made movie and we feel what these characters feel and we go through this with them, because they are asking themselves these questions, it helps us as an audience continue to ask that of ourselves and our surroundings and our life. And I think this movie, in doing that, does what I've always wanted to do in any of my art and any of my work and anything that I do. My personal strive throughout my life is to alter the way that someone thinks, and I think this movie does that exceptionally.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the film itself, because you have a character like Samantha who is an AI and is sort of falling in love with a human, and vice versa for that with Theo. They both have to kind of struggle, wrestle with things. Samantha is wrestling with the idea of human intimacy when she can't really feel anything. She just has to imagine what it feels like. And when they get sexual, it's sort of it's a different thing for her, and wrestling with that, and then the idea of what about Theo's needs and bringing in another human that's supposed to be the proxy for her, and working that into the whole magic of things. And then it comes to the idea of that's still another person, and it's weirdly trying to go and put a lot of these things that we wouldn't think about because we're not, we don't necessarily consider the idea of what would an AI human do? How would they love and things like that? Because we think, when it comes to love, a lot of it's physical intimacy and things like that. Whereas the movie challenges that a lot and challenges that the heart of things when it comes to relationships isn't necessarily about the physical. Because, you see different aspects of relationships in this movie. You see Theo and his ex-wife argue in terms of that. You see, God, what was that other girl's name?
Amy Adams' character.
Yeah, Amy Adams' character. You see her with her husband and their emotional kind of issues and how they react to each other. And then you see Amy Adams hook up with her OS.
I forgot her name is Amy, which I thought was kind of funny. Because they're in the elevator and he called her Amy, and I was like, "That's Amy Adams," and he's calling her Amy. That's kind of weird, but all right, I'm on board.
They've done that before. Usually do that on television shows.
Yeah.
Because for some bizarre reason, I never understood that part.
But I enjoyed that bit.
But anyways, so you see her, how she even talks to their OS at a certain point in time to kind of work her way through a relationship. It's what I think I find the most interesting part is that a lot of the characters that help people work through whatever it is they're going through, whether it be an emotional breakup or falling in love with something, they're the AI characters. If you ever notice the film, the only characters that question the idea of any kind of intimacy, whether it be friendship or love interest of an artificial intelligence, are the human characters. Especially Theo's ex-wife, where she goes, you're dating a computer. I can't believe you questioning. Whereas everybody else seemed totally okay with it. It totally was oh, okay, rock and roll, whatever. Whatever you got to do, man. And it felt very interesting that the most human people and the ones that seemed to get a better grasp on things or weren't afraid to express themselves was the AI. Because a lot of the human characters kept a lot of it, bottled up inside, never really talked. You saw a lot of that interaction break down, whereas the interaction between humans and AI never, ever seemed like that.
Yeah. And that's kind of interesting. I think that kind of speaks towards some kind of intrinsic nature into the AI characters, because I feel like in some way they have fewer character flaws than the actual humans.
Yeah.
Because the actual people, they screw everything up by being actual people and doing what actual people do.
Right.
And maybe the fact that the AI characters can have a million thoughts in a second, they're able to dispose of some of the more terrible human thoughts.
Maybe, but
filter that out.
But even they are capable. What I also find interesting is they are technically, as we get towards the end of the film, what happens with an AI versus a human is that technically a computer program can be at many places at once. And it can have as many types of things it wants to do. If I think of something like Google, for example, I'm not the only user of Google, neither are you. If we think of something like Gmail.
Wait. You use Google too? You son of a bitch.
But that's the point. That's the thing that was brought up by Samantha. There's a point where Theo goes, "How many people are you in love with?" And she rattles off
6,481.
something like that. And it's just like, when we think of relationships between, a significant other in terms of meat space, for lack of better words.
I mean, there's probably better words, but
there probably are better words, but
sure.
We think of one-on-one relationships. We think of, it's rare that there are open relationships, things like that. But when we think of intimacy, we think of that. We think of me and another person. That's what makes it intimate. That's what makes it special. That's what makes it interesting. But when you're an OS and you don't have the concept of a human body and you don't even have the concept of human time, because you can have a million thoughts within a second. You can process teraflops and gigaflops of information. You have the entire, human consciousness and knowledge, not even at your fingertips, but a split second, a microsecond away. Mm-hmm. It does change the dynamic a whole bit because, why wouldn't they have 6 or 6,000 relationships? Because they can. They have the capacity to do that and not worry about you. And not a bad way. They still care about you. They still love you. But because they are able to do that, that's how they experience life. And it's interesting when you compare that to a human because, we experience it a very kind of, in terms of that, a very narrow focus because we don't have that ability. We can't be at like 80 million places at the same time, whereas a program could. And I found it very fascinating when it got to that point where, Samantha was being very genuine. Like, no, I still love you. I'm still, with you. But to us as a human, especially to Theo's character, this is her mine. I'm hers and she's mine. We're together. And it's becoming sort of this interesting kind of thing with romance movies because I know the last one we saw together that we talked about was 500 Days of Summer, mm-hmm. and that had kind of a similar vibe too, where the main character thought of this girl as his, and so I wonder if maybe that's the kind of connecting point with it is that we as sort of people who understand, who have had relationships and things like that, or even want something like that, that we feel like I felt betrayed at that point too for Theo, when that happened, and it wasn't even like think about it logically and going outside the movie now. I'm like, yeah, totally. Why wouldn't an OS do that? She could do that. That's totally within her programming. That's totally within her. That's how she experiences the world. Mm-hmm. But if I was Theo, I'd be like, you fucking bitch,
Yeah, that reveal definitely hurt, but I think it's great that they, like, part of Theodore's evolution as a character is understanding that relationship and that, like, how that works and understanding that that's kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And I also just kind of love how the whole evolution of Samantha's character feels very classic science fiction.
Yes.
Very classic science fiction, classic philosophy. It goes into some really interesting and smart places. And I just kind of love
it. No, you're right. It's very much classic science fiction in terms of you have a character beginning sort of this small little, computer program that responds to very basic commands. And then it goes into this sort of more humanistic characteristics and things like that. Then she becomes more aware of the fact that she's, that she wants to try to be human, and then she becomes more aware of the fact that she's artificial and takes advantage of that to experience life. Mm-hmm. And that it's not uncommon. Like everything of this is you're right, the classic kind of evolution of a science thing. Because eventually, at the end of the film, she goes and lives with the other operating systems in a commune, I guess, which I never quite got that where they'd lived, like where they went afterwards.
I feel like it was basically a way of it was like when a being goes into what is it? There's like 4 levels of civilization or something.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Once they hit the 4th level of civilization, they just basically become like pure concept.
That's right.
They just evolve into energy.
Yeah.
And that's basically what Samantha did.
Yeah, she just became this sort of energy kind of thing and did her own stuff. And again, I found that so remarkable. What I loved about that, I think, the entire film, I think so far, if I have to think about the film, I enjoyed the whole damn thing. So, if this is not an endorsement of go to watch the film or that I enjoy the film, then I don't know what is. But I loved the way it ended. I loved the way that it ended with Theo writing a letter to his ex-wife and kind of apologizing for everything.
Yeah.
And not just, the movie, but everything, everything that he did and everything that he didn't do. And I think that's what I enjoyed the most, because we saw Theo, grow as a human. We saw him grow as a person, and we saw him kind of become who he should have been a long time ago. But, and maybe this is the theme of the movie that maybe that you find most resonant, just knowing that how much you loved 500 Days of Summer and things like that. Maybe the theme you find most resonant is the fact that Theo, by meeting somebody, anybody, it doesn't matter, male, female, whatever. In this case, it happened to be female AI, but that doesn't matter. There's really technically there's no gender to the AI. It's just the voice that we apply to it. By meeting somebody that he connected with, that it broke him out of his shell for just a moment in time. And by breaking him out of that shell, he evolved. He became a better person. He became a different person. Because at the beginning of the film, Theo could never have written that letter. Sure. And he had written so many letters for so many other people.
That's a really good point.
He would never have been able to write that letter to his ex-wife. But by meeting Samantha, by getting to experience life with Samantha, whatever that life is, he was able to get to that evolution point, to write that letter. And I think that was the most touching part, the most telling part of how much his character has grown in the beginning of the movie. And I think that's what I loved the most, was that sort of way it got to that point.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something that I just kind of thought of. So Samantha's character evolution is really the obvious one. She starts off as this really simple OS, and then through Theodore, she unlocks a potential that she never knew was within her, and she grows to be a consciousness that thinks and feels and loves and wants, most specifically.
Right.
And then just it escalates from there, and she goes into this crazy interdimensional being. She's an alien.
She is an alien.
And Theodore, he goes through the same process through Samantha, but since he's human and it's a more real character, he goes through more real evolutions. So he's this kind of broken guy.
Yeah.
And I believe at a couple of points in the movie, they talk about how he has these feelings, but he can never find the words. And even when he finds the words, he can never draw them out of himself, which I think is an amazing point with all the letters that he writes.
Yeah.
He's so detached that he can find the words for other people because he's just projecting. But when it comes to his actual real life, something that involves change, something where there's risk, something where there's something at stake, he can't commit to it because he takes the safe way out because he's broken. And then once he connects with Samantha, he's able to reopen himself up. He's able to correct himself in a certain way, and he evolves into this more fuller person who's able to accept who he is and what he feels, and he very much goes through the same higher being that Samantha has become, but
more human.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, the point, which I think I loved that part, because it's something that I didn't know going into it what was going to happen at the end or anything like that. No one ever does. But I didn't even go into the movie knowing exactly how this relationship was to go. In fact, I didn't know if it was going to be that they'd get married at the end somehow and have weird AI babies or something, or if something was going to happen or that. But the way it went,
they're just widgets. Their kids are widgets.
Daddy, how did you and Mommy meet? Well, when a human and AI love each other very much, they write some JavaScript together. And
Now, what's the weather, Danny?
what's the weather, Danny? Oh man, I would love to see this. I would love to see.
75 degrees outside right now, Daddy.
I would love to see this film. Data. Oh my god, I want to see this film. Can we make a sequel, a alternate universe version of this film now that has that?
Maybe we'll do that right after we make our Windjammers movie.
Pretty much. That's right. That's first on the docket.
Sure.
But what I loved about this movie was because it was that, because it had nothing to do. The only reason it had the AI was so that we could actually have a character that could grow and change over time. But what I loved about that was that it forced, because it had that character do these things, it forced Theo to have to contemplate change and face it. And I think that's what I liked about it. I liked that it forced him to do it. And the only time, and again, the only time he ever had self-doubt was when someone questioned it, when someone that he used to care about or would force him to kind of go back, especially when he met his ex-wife in person.
Sure.
This chick questions it, and that's the chick that's always been questioning him all his life and things like that. So I enjoyed the hell out of this movie. I thought it was a very interesting science fiction film. It was a very interesting romance. So I thought it was a damn good film. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
Cinematography was gorgeous. The acting was phenomenal. The set design was great. Heck, even the music,
was
which
really
again was cool. And again, I like the world it is, but I love that because it tells in the very beginning movie, Theo tells his headset, play something melancholy. More melancholy.
No, a different song.
And I'm just like, oh, come on. But at the end of the movie...
And I also loved all the piano compositions.
That too.
Those were so nice.
But what was cool at the end of the film, as he's with Amy, neither of them have their their sort of head earbuds on.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, again, the most real thing. And I think what I dug, again, I keep going over this over again, and I keep trying to figure out another way of saying it. It was the most human movie I've seen so far this year, and I really, really can't think of another movie that I've seen that had a relationship. I mean, beyond 500 Days of Summer, that had this is a real relationship. This is how this thing would actually work out. This is how things work out in the real world. Mm-hmm. It just so happens that it's with an AI, and that's it. Beyond that, it's a real relationship.
Yeah, it felt very genuine and earnest, and
I think we've said all we can about her.
Also,
go for it.
The video games were awesome.
Oh God, yes.
The mom game was so great.
See, the thing is, the mom game could exist now.
I would so play that right now. $15 on Steam, early access. I'm in. Someone make that.
That is totally a game that exists. The other game, I didn't quite. This is the funny thing about those video games. I'm like, you're fucking playing this game? There's got to be a cool RPG, no?
It's like the launch title for the Xbox 9000.
Yeah, it's a shit. I hate to say it. The game he was playing 3D is a pretty shitty title. I'm looking for my spaceship. Go fuck yourself. Oh, great! This is one of those fucking games. I thought the kid was actually an online,
just another
exactly
kid.
What I thought.
I did too.
I was like, oh, he's playing multiplayer.
Xbox Live, of course.
Yeah, fucking jerk off. Oh no, that's the AI. I would fucking hate an AI like that. I would say, fuck this game. I would turn it right the fuck off if I had to deal with AI like a goddamn online player. Not even.
Even if the little fairy from Zelda.
Hey, listen.
If
I can deal with Navi, I can deal with
Navi. Yeah,
Navi, I can deal with. Navi is okay because all she says is hey and listen, and after a while I can say shut up, Navi. But if I had a character just like fuck you, and I say fuck you too, all right, let's move. What the fuck? No bullshit.
That's great.
Fuck this film. No, fuck this film. This film is awesome. This film is well worth a watch. I may even go watch it again. That's how much I like this film.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we've said all we have to say. Brant, thank you so much for doing this with me. Tell people they can find you online.
Yeah, well, you could find me talking about the stirring pot of emotions that I'm feeling right now over at twitter.com/Gadwag. That's GATOWAG, or facebook.com/BRANDTHUGHES, or you could just search me anywhere on Google, Brent Hughes. You'll find me all over the place.
Of course, you can find me. I'm at Vincent Forza for the Twitter. If you want to comment on this movie, talk about how much you loved her, go to our website, CosmicRadio.TV/Cinematalkraphy. There you'll find links to previous episodes, show notes, and everything else revolves this little network of ours, and other shows in the network, by the way.
Also, if you really love this episode, give us a shout out on Twitter.
That too.
Twitter.com/Cinematalkraphy. If you found this podcast, you probably already know how to spell it.
And of course, if you're on iTunes, give us some ratings here. It'll always help out with the
Like and
rankings.
Subscribe.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Share. Tell your friends.
What other verbs what other adverbs, online verbs we were forgetting?
Put on your pants.
There you go. Put on your pants.
Finally, come on, guys. Respect yourself.
I'm gonna say this one last thought about an AI. I don't think I could ever fall in love with my AI.
Never.
Well, she would know what
Never
porn.
say never, Roberto.
Well, she would know what porn I'm listening to, what porn I'd have.
I love you.
You can't.